Welcome to Earth and Kind Quests. My name is Mike, and this video is about how to work with environment types or environmental zones in your games of Dungeons & Dragons and other creative world building. Regarding the possibilities of natural environments, I have found only sparse and inconsistent information in the official rules and latest sourcebooks of Dungeons & Dragons. Environments are mentioned for every creature in the Monster Manual. If you are using D&D Beyond Online, then you can filter the entries by the environment type. As another useful resource, random tables of monsters are presented by the separate environment types in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Most of us would want to know more about the environment type or category in order to make the most effective choices about the monsters who could live here, what they are doing most of the time, and how they could relate with possible adventuring encounters. Accordingly, this video here offers advice about how to make an environment feel realistic and different from other places as the basis for developing your adventures. The topic of this video was suggested by another friendly YouTube creator, FantasyCraft Forge. If you are looking for ambience and mood settings in your games and creative works, then you might like some of the output by FantasyCraft Forge. This video shares about my general approach with environmental settings, and I probably will develop additional videos with examples of specific environments. Based on what we can see in the Monster Manual, the environment types include 11 categories of Arctic, Coastal, Desert, Forest, Grassland, Hill, Mountain, Swamp, Underdark, Underwater, and Urban. You probably noticed the inconsistencies in how these environments were categorized, including intermixed attributes of climate zones, terrain landforms, and ecological habitat biomes. An Arctic climate zone could include terrain landforms of coastal, hill, and mountain categories. A landform of hilly terrain could include ecological habitat biomes of desert, grassland, and forest. As far as I can ascertain, these categories were intended as general guidelines that could be interpreted in various ways. For instance, a humid tropical jungle could include components of nearly all of these standard environment types, except for Arctic and desert. Most adventuring settings, just like in real life, involve variations and hybrids of these category types. Probably the easiest way to start with an environmental setting is to find a real-life example of a place. A map and a picture go a long way to convey what an environment is like without needing to dive into too much detail. In my homebrew campaign world, a small population area is nestled between the ocean on one side and the rugged interior mountains on the other side. Plenty of real-life settings are similar, and I focused on one place that I personally felt comfortable in portraying. I called this place Snowgate, situated between the Arctic Ocean of the Angel Flow and the interior terrain of the Cloudmarch Mountains. This setting includes multiple of the standard environment types of Dungeons & Dragons. Many different adventures could occur here. In this case of Snowgate, just like for any environmental setting, I considered how people could live here. How could people manage their fundamental practical concerns of water sources, food supplies, and shelter? I added a local feature about how warm springs and hot springs are underground here, coming to the surface in some spots, and overall allowing for more healthy plant growth and natural habitat than otherwise might be expected in this cold climate. People can engage in gardening and farming, especially in the lowland terrain zone close with the warm underground water table. Several family farmsteads are scattered outside the formal town walls and outside the denser urban zone of Snowgate. The coastline offers reliable supplies of shellfish, seaweeds, and nearshore fishing. A few people would venture farther out into the ocean for deep-sea fishing, possible whaling adventures, and overseas trade commerce. People could go into the foothills for collecting tree timbers, hunting and trapping of birds and other animals, and gathering seasonal tree nuts and fruits, herbs and mosses, and other resources. Only a few people very rarely would venture up into the higher mountainous terrain, possibly in the context of a defensive watchtower, a religious pilgrimage, or a celestial observatory. After considering the practicalities of how people could live in and around Snowgate, then I felt confident about adding fantasy elements of monsters and magic. For instance, some of the warm springs and hot springs could produce sulfurous and potentially flammable fumes perceived as openings into a hellish underworld. People probably developed rituals for appeasing the spirits of these places, and you might even interpret possible roles for a fire giant, an Efreet, a red dragon, or a fire elemental. For the warm springs with pure water sources, people probably respected them as sacred places, and they may have developed ways of maintaining positive relations with the nature spirits and gods who could ensure the ongoing access to these precious water sources. Within the larger context of this cold climate setting, seasonal variations probably were important for the cycles of planting and harvesting, the spawning of salmon, and the habits of bears and other animals living through the winter season. These practical issues could affect where and when owl bears and hill giants are most active, the opportunities for the bandits and pirates, and the timing of an invasion by goblins. In this example of Snowgate, I did not dive into an overload of information. Rather, I composed the basic map and imagery about what the place looks like, and then I drafted an outline of the few notes that I have shared here without actually locking myself into the details. In this way, I was able to adjust the adventure along with whatever the characters decided to do in this place. Furthermore, I could adjust the challenge level for whatever would be the most suitable. In Chapter 4 of the new 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, you can see a useful guideline about planning the challenge level of an encounter. The procedure starts with knowing the character level of the adventuring group, and then this number value can correlate with a budget for each individual character in terms of the total experience points of the monsters and other challenges that could be presented as low, moderate, or high difficulty. The advice here in the Dungeon Master's Guide is about choosing the monsters in combat situations that add up to the suitable numbers of experience points. I apply the same procedure for the experience points not only with monsters but also with the challenges in the natural environment, traps and puzzles, and social interactions. In my example of the Snowgate area, the characters at one point planned to explore into the foothills, technically a combination of the forest and hill environment types. I prepared a list of the possible challenges, and I noted the numbers of experience points for each possible component. I included gradations of low through high challenges, translating into a broad range of possible experience points for each component. In this way, I could adjust the configuration of the components in whatever manner would work best for a low, moderate, or high challenge. I considered about environmental factors that could pose challenges. Local weather events might include foggy obscurement, rain, or snow. Terrain formations in the hills probably do not include hazards of quicksand or sinkholes, but caves and other underground areas could be here with opportunities for exploration and for supporting the layers of monsters. Varying densities of forest growth could create difficult terrain and possibilities of becoming lost. A list of the naturally occurring plants and animals always can be helpful for making the environment feel more realistic, plus these lists can inspire possible giant-sized or monstrous versions of the plants and animals. In terms of the people and monsters in the forested hill terrain, I created localized variations of bandits, goblins, and other creatures with varying degrees of their challenge ratings. Additional challenge components could occur with animal companions or with traps and other defensive features. I added a local legend about a Sasquatch type of creature, At first, I thought about a variation of an ogre, but then I decided to make my own homebrew version as a challenge rating 1 creature. A Sasquatch is not necessarily an adversary working against the characters, unless the characters will do something that could be perceived as threatening to a Sasquatch or to the natural environment. I created possibilities of layers for all of these creatures, as well as for the possibilities of higher challenge rating monsters of owlbears and hill giants. Only very rarely will I create a fixed location of an encounter in the adventuring map. Instead, I prefer to work with generalized zones, and then I adjust for an encounter to happen in whatever location will be suitable within a zone. A rare exception might be a specific monster layer with limited options of where it could be located. I might create additional videos with more details and examples for other kinds of environmental settings. In the comment section, please share about your thoughts and experiences with world building of environmental settings.